Chapter 31. The wall panel, pulled away, revealed more computer circuitry and other electronic gadgetry than Tessa had ever seen before in one place. She had no idea what Deck and Gideon had just done, or what Gideon had meant by got the depth shot, but Gideon and Deck were grinning at each other like they'd just won the war. Um, Tessa said. Gideon paused in the midst of holding a computer chip up to the light. He looked back at Tessa. His movements were almost leisurely now, so Tessa thought he might have the answer to a question. I'm guessing that whatever you and Deck just did was a good thing? Tessa asked. Oh, right, Gideon said. You wouldn't understand. See, the M chip and the interface were. Tessa could feel her eyes glazing over. I'll explain, Deck said. It's like we got the computer to think about where the information we wanted was located in its memory. At that exact moment, Gideon pretty much took a picture of the computer's entire functioning. So now we know where to find the information we need. We have a record of it all. What good does that do if the computer can lie? Tessa asked. If it can change its story anytime it wants. Gideon lifted the chip higher, or maybe it was something more like a flash drive. Tessa had always been a little vague about computer parts. This is a copy of what the computer was thinking to itself, not what it was planning to tell us, Gideon said. It's exactly what was in its circuits, and we're going to look at this copy outside of the system. The computer can't change any of our data now. No. You're confused about what you really have there, the computer voice said, but it sounded weak and worried now. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain, Tessa muttered. There's a man? Where? Dex said, turning around in a panic. That was just a literary reference, Tessa said. A line from a book, The Wizard of Oz. Someone else who lied. Tessa remembered the colorful pictures in the book from a movie she'd never seen. She'd always felt like the book was only a remnant, only the smallest scrap left from the past. Was that why she didn't fully trust herself to explain? The other two went back to working on the computer circuitry before them. The voice didn't say anything else. Tessa wasn't sure what that meant. Had Gideon and Deck outsmarted the computer, or was the computer just confident that the guards would get them anyhow, so nothing else mattered? Um, she interrupted again. If you've got what you need, should we maybe go somewhere else to look at it? Somewhere a little safer? Gideon shook his head without even looking up. We've got to make sure we have the right thing, he muttered. In just a few seconds, we'll have things set up to find out. He seemed to lose track of what he was saying while he twisted wires and reassembled circuits. Deck was right beside him, tapping at a keyboard. The two of them were working together in perfect sync again. Sorry I can't help, Tessa mumbled. I'm just no good with this kind of thing. Here, Deck said, handing her something that looked a little bit like a miniature laptop assembled in 5 minutes from spare parts by someone who cared a lot more about what the laptop could do than how it looked. Tessa decided that this was probably exactly what she was holding. Push this button and you can scan the archives, Deck said, pointing at a raised knob. You'll see the history of what the computer was thinking about. That might be useful. Push this button was simple enough for Tessa to follow. She sat down with her back against one of the still intact walls. In seconds, she was watching footage of a young man with a military-style haircut standing in the control room. I have proof, he was saying. I saw the war zone with my own eyes, and there's nobody there. Ah, but how did you check your location? A familiar computer voice asked the young man. With the instruments on the plane. And don't you know that the overall computer system can change geographic coordinates? The computer voice asked. That I can make those tell you anything I want? I I guess, the young man said. I didn't think of that. The screen went dark for a second, and then the young man's face was replaced by that of a young woman in an old-fashioned military uniform. I know what I saw in the war zone, she was insisting. But how can you be sure where you were when you saw it? The computer asked. Tessa realized that there was a date stamped on this footage, so she backtracked and looked at the first date, too. The young man with the military haircut had stood before the computer asking his questions nearly 75 years earlier. Tessa scanned forward. The young woman's questioning had followed the young man's by about a month, and they weren't the only ones. Again and again, over the past 75 years, people had stood in this control room admitting that they'd been in the war zone and it hadn't looked the way they'd expected. And again, the computer had convinced those people that they were wrong. The intervals between the confrontations had gotten longer and longer. Before Gideon, Deck, and Tessa, it looked like the last time someone had sneaked into the war zone had been about 10 years ago. What did that mean? Ready, Gideon said from his position bent over behind the destroyed wall. Tessa looked up. Now there was a computer screen showing through on one of the untouched walls. Just another way for the computer to lie to us, Tessa muttered, with pictures, too. No, Deck said, shaking her head. We've set up a completely independent network now. The computer system can't change anything we're going to see. This will be just from the depth shot we captured. Gideon pressed a few buttons. A map appeared on the screen. Tessa recognized the outline of their continent. Surely, the border between Eastham and Westham was missing. Strangely, the border between Eastham and Westham was missing, but lines were drawn near the east and west coasts labeled boundaries of war zone. There's one more thing this map can show, Gideon said, squinting at the fine print at the bottom. Population density. He hit another key. The line showing the boundaries of the war zone disappeared. But Tessa could still see exactly where they'd been. The only population showed up in clusters on the east and west coasts. The entire middle section of the map stayed blank and white. No, no, Gideon said, hitting more keys, making adjustments. Show some tint, even if it's a minimum population. Even if there's just one person in a million square miles. The map didn't change. The entire war zone was empty.